This video is an introduction to anatomy and physiology. Anatomy refers to the structure of something, its form, whereas physiology has to do with its function, its job, what it does. These two concepts are very closely related. That is, a spoon is really good for certain things, but a fork is good for other things. The structure is closely related to its function, what it's useful for. So spoons are really good for things like cereal and ice cream, but a fork is good for other things like spaghetti and salad. In a similar way, anatomy, the study of the structure, is very closely related to physiology, the function. That is, the way a thing is built is very closely related to what it's able to do. And by having certain structures, functions become available. And sometimes, because something is necessary, a structure is built for that purpose. So these two concepts very closely related. In this class, we'll study a little bit of both, the anatomy, the structure of things, as well as the physiology, the function, what it does. There are several different ways to study anatomy, the structure, depending on how small you want to get. So like microscopic, like cytology or histology, is very small structures. Macro means big. Macroscopic things like gross anatomy are much larger structures. A regional anatomy, again, is going to be something slightly larger, like a body area, for example, like a brain or the head or the mouth. Systems anatomy is going to be focusing on like a cardiovascular system or like a respiratory system. So you might see doctors, for example, that specialize in certain systems. Again, physiology has to do with the function. And why are these two things so important? Why is the structure so important? Why is the function so important? Because sometimes you have structures, they're just not working properly. Sometimes you have a structure that's broken or it's disrupted. Well, both of these things work together to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis just means your internal conditions. So you are moving through an environment, the environment constantly changes, but your internal conditions remain the same. So your anatomy and physiology are working together to maintain homeostasis, making sure you have steady internal conditions. Well, there's several different ways you can study form, and if you've been in the medical profession at all or around it, you probably recognize some of these things. Think of the acronym PAID. The first P stands for palpitation, like you're feeling. So for example, the doctor might feel along your lymph nodes to see if they're swollen. The next P for PAID is percussion, to tap. So they're tapping, and what they're looking for is like, is it mushy there? Is it watery there? Is there fluid buildup? So percussion, like a percussion instrument, you bang on it. That's what they're doing, percussing. Asculation means to hear. So the asculation has to do with hearing. The AUS has to do with hearing. You're listening. So they might have a stethoscope and they're listening to hear your breathing or to hear your heart rate. Inspection means to look. So one of the neat things about the human body is you have a left side and a right side, and we can compare those sides. So we can look at the one side compared to the other. For example, a stroke victim might have one side be very droopy compared to the other side. We're inspecting it. You might look for color, like yellow if there's jaundice, or like pallor if they're pale looking. And then dissection means to cut. So when you dissect something, you're cutting in to look inside and see on the inside. It's a great way to study form because there's so much variation in the world. You can study all kinds of diagrams, but in real life, things might look very different because that person's anatomy often reflects their experiences. Living things have smaller parts that make up larger parts. And a mnemonic to help you remember this is atom meets one cell, tries out something outrageous. So if you can come up with a good mnemonic like that, that'd be great. But the idea is that atoms make up molecules, molecules make up organelles, organelles make up cells, cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, organs make up systems, and systems make up the whole organism. Cells and organisms I have highlighted here because that's where we can find life. Like cells are living and organisms are living, but tissues are not. Like if you took a tissue or an organ and you put it on a plate, it would not be alive. So here's an atom like carbon. They make up molecules like carbon dioxide or super complicated molecules like DNA. DNA stores information. It stores it in the nucleus of the cell. The shape of DNA is a double helix, and it has this information to code for all kinds of living things. Well, molecules make up organelles like ribosomes or Golgi apparatus or the nucleus or mitochondria. Those are organelles. They have certain jobs. And the organelles make up cells. Like this is an example of a nerve cell or neuron. Cells make up tissue, like nervous tissue or muscle tissue or connective tissue. When you get several tissues together, they make up an organ like the heart or lungs. And then those organs make up organ systems like the integumentary system or muscular system. These are some of the systems that we're going to study. So for example, your integumentary system consists of things like hair and nails, and it has a job, a function, like protection and sensation. The muscular system consists of muscles, and it has a job, movement. The skeletal system consists of bones and joints, and it has a job, support and protection, storing minerals. The endocrine system consists of glands, and it has a job, regulate, usually long-term, control by hormones. The nervous system has parts like the brain and spinal cord, and then it has a job, like senses things, and it helps short-term control of things. The cardiovascular system has parts like the heart and blood vessels, and has a job, like it circulates nutrients. The lymphatic system consists of lymphatic vessels and the spleen, and its job is to help your immune system. The respiratory system consists of the lungs and trachea, and it helps exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. The digestive system consists of the stomach and the small and large intestine, and it's going to help to get nutrients in your body and remove wastes. The urinary system consists of the kidneys and bladder, and it's going to help manage things like your pH levels. The reproductive system might consist of things like the testes and ovaries, and that's how we get a new life. Here's a picture of an individual that points out some of these organs and systems. Like number 1 is pointing to the lungs. That's part of the respiratory system. 2 is pointing to the heart. That's part of the cardiovascular system. 5 is pointing to the stomach. That's part of the digestive system. Some organs are going to be part of more than one system, and that's okay. So like 3 is the liver. You could put it in the digestive system. You might also put it in the endocrine system. 4 is the large intestine, and 6 is the small intestine. How do we know even that something is living? So an acronym for some of the characteristics of life is DOGS merch, like merchandise, DOGS merch. The D here stands for DNA. The O stands for organization, like living things are organized. The G stands for living things grow and develop. That means they go through stages. The S stands for stimulus. We get information, but then we respond. We do something with it. The M stands for movement. That could be internal movement, or that could be the individual is moving. The E stands for energy. That's your metabolism. You can either build things up, anabolism, or break things down, catabolism. Reproduction for humans is going to be a sexual reproduction. Every living thing is made of cells. Those cells make up tissues. You're made of something like 6 trillion cells. Then homeostasis means that living things maintain their internal conditions. In order to be alive, you need oxygen, nutrients, appropriate temperature, and appropriate pressure. Without any one of these things, you're not going to live for very long. The only thing that separates a baby or a 2-year-old from an adult is oxygen, nutrients, temperature, pressure, and time. So all the DNA is there to code for that life to happen. All it needs is these requirements and then time. In order to maintain homeostasis, there's 2 major kinds of feedback. Negative feedback, which corrects the problem by doing the opposite, and positive feedback, which corrects the problem by doing more of the same. So here's a feedback loop that's illustrating negative feedback. Let's say the variable is something like body temperature. So as your body temperature rises, it's picked up by a receptor, that's a nerve ending, that sends a message to your brain, that's the control center, which sends a message to an effector, muscle or gland. So your brain's going to determine that you're too hot, your body temperature is too high. The effector, muscle or gland, like a sweat gland, is going to produce sweat to bring your body temperature back down to normal. So the high body temperature is corrected, that's negative feedback, by doing the opposite. So negative feedback over time looks kind of like this wave where you're too hot, too cold, too hot, too cold, and your body's going to keep adjusting to keep you within a narrow range that we call homeostasis. Another example would be insulin. Your blood sugar level is up. So your pancreas detects that, causes the pancreas to secrete insulin, which lowers your blood sugar back down to normal. It's correcting it by doing the opposite. Example of positive feedback would be birth. The baby's head is pushing against the cervix. That causes a message to be sent to the brain, where the brain releases a hormone called oxytocin, which causes the uterus to contract, which makes the baby's head push even harder against the cervix. And your body's going to keep secreting more and more oxytocin. Those contractions are going to get more and more and more intense until the cycle is broken by the delivery of the baby. So that's an example of positive feedback. Sometimes we're investigating disorders, other times we're investigating diseases. So whenever homeostasis is disrupted and you can't fix it by positive or negative feedback, there's either a problem with a disorder or disease. Disorders just mean the problem is an abnormality, but a disease is a result of a change in the body. So it started out okay, but then there was a problem. Those are typically categorized as diseases. Disorders are something where the physical body is abnormal or the function isn't working properly. So that wraps up this video, just getting started, and there's a part 2 that'll talk more about body planes and some regional and relative anatomical terms. See you next time.